Yeah, so you're giving your dad a little credit there with your recruiting process.
Yeah, definitely. He had a lot to learn in the beginning, and I have a sister that's 2 years older than me, so she was going through the process before I was, and she ended up at a Division III school in Christopher Newport in Virginia Beach. And I was lucky to play on a team with like a lot of girls that were going Division I, and it was like a highly recruited team.
Mm-hmm.
All of us ended up going Division I. I played against a couple of them in college, and I want to say 3 of us actually played pro after college. So
Mm-hmm.
we were very all the parents were like involved in the whole process, and our coaches were very involved. But we were lucky to kind of be on a team that was like sought after and highly recruited from. And, we went to a bunch of tournaments where there were a lot of coaches there. But in the beginning, my parents didn't know much. So
Right.
like a very big learning curve. So if it's your first kid, other guy me, and he went to called Colby College.
Mm-hmm.
He was recruited to play soccer, playing, but parents went through that whole process as well, and it's just a whole learning thing. And then it's over, right? Like you don't get that time to figure it out. You have to figure it out, and your sophomore year game. So it's definitely awesome that you're doing this and trying to get the education out there. So have the resources.
Yeah. So the guy who guest hosts with me a lot is the men's coach at Christopher Newport, and I've had Jamie Gunderson, who's the women's coach at Christopher Newport, on a bunch of times too. So very connected to Christopher Newport. So when was your sister there?
The men's team, the women's team was great too. I just remember watching the men play. Really fun to watch them. She was there from 2007 to 2011.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So let's get more into your recruiting story and how you ended up at Tech, and then what happened after that.
Yeah. So like I said, I played on it's called Montclair Aristocats. We were out in Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, all of us were, highly recruited out of high school. A couple girls on my team recruited when they were like in grade. Schools are different now, but back then they were a little bit like looser, and people got away with that. So I was highly recruited by Penn State and ended up going there. But yeah, my sophomore year got myself on the map, and I would say my freshman year when I joined, I was one of the, not as refined players, I would say, and then kind of getting through and playing with the girls and kind of, raising my level. I would say like I peaked my senior year. So everybody peaks at a different time because some players peak super early and they're in a great place and they're in ninth grade, and then whether it's the game gets to them or they're burnt out or they keep earlier, right? And then they stop growing and everybody else up to them. It could be that sort of thing. But for me, was, I guess I would say, around the same time with my sophomore year that was my senior year, and I was just getting better technically and kind of started getting recognized because I would definitely give credit to my team, which is able to say that there were great players on my team, so there were great coaches watching. So I got looked at pretty seriously by UVA, the UVA coach, Virginia Tech coach, Rutgers, some big, just big time schools, big time Division I schools in there. And so on recruiting visits and looking at different places, and decided I didn't want to go to Rutgers. It was too close to home. I didn't want to stay in Jersey, and it was kind of Virginia and Virginia Tech. And what really stood out to me at Virginia Tech, I just really felt like I felt like home there, home away from home, and it did become that when I went there with people. It just felt like the right people, like the right vibe when I was on campus. I got along with them really well, and I wanted to be a football school. school, like I want to play in the soccer competition. And I would say it's mostly like got on felt like junior in high school. I was like old. And looking back on it, it's like, how did I know? But you don't really know. You just, you go with what feels right, and I always tell kids now and they're going through the process to make the decision for themselves. There's obviously like their parents for sounding boards. But make sure you're making the right decision for for yourself. You feel comfortable, you like the campus, you want to, for Manhattan College, it's being big, like there's a lot of things that you look at throughout the process when you're deciding where you want to go to school for
Right.
4 years.
Right. I mean, I went to Tech, so I'm partial. I don't know how you would choose UVA over Tech, but
yeah, me neither.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if you had made that choice? Yeah. So then, talk about your college career. Like you obviously played at a high level as a youth player, and then you get to college and talk about how you adapted to the difference in level, and then what kind of were the keys, like looking back, what you found out there you wish you had known in high school. Kind of just like walk through the whole learning experience of getting acclimated to the college game at a high level too. I mean, ACC, yeah.
It's definitely a different level, like in terms of physicality and athleticism. It's a different level, and I don't know how you would define, the other conferences across the country. I'm a bit more familiar with like MAC level now and play out of conference, but in terms of like what the SEC looks like, or what the Pac-10 or Pac-12, whatever it is now, looks like, it could be different from East Coast to West Coast. So I'm just going to see it's just the most conference that I've ever experienced in college. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't say that like I wish I went in stronger, because honestly, like going into college, I prepared as best I could have, just playing with, and it's the way I wanted. I think it's very technical and development before you get to college, and then when you get to college, more team focused. And so that's kind of our challenge as coaches now, and my challenge is like, how do I keep that technical side of the game and individual side of the game like in the forefront of our minds, but also right now we have like 3 months really, and it's August, September, October, beginning of November playoffs, right? So it's just, and preseason's midway through August, right? August like 8th until halfway through. So it's a very short time to figure a lot out. We don't have a lot of time to develop the girls. Like we have to work with what we have. And so, going in, it's kind of like fresh, guns blazing, like, whoa, where am I? Like, okay, like I'm adapting. I have to adapt. I don't have it, right? And then go into the spring and then you're like, okay, either, but it's very, very much on what conference you're in, what team you're in. It's very on weights and fitness and getting stronger and bigger to compete. In a conference that's very strong and big. Like as a freshman, 17-year-olds, you're coming in and you're competing against 21, 22 year olds. Yeah. So it's a big difference in 3-year-olds to freshmen that's lifted before.
Right.
So it's different conference to conference, but I would say like that's the biggest thing for me is like I wasn't development focused as honestly I would have liked it to be, and the different reality and yeah, I mean you're playing against players about
Right.
so it's that type of play. It's like physical, and you're lucky to get through without.
Yeah, I had a couple of players on. One was from women's players one was South Carolina, and one had spent 4 years at Georgetown, and she just transferred to Northeastern to for a grad school year. And they said that their freshman year, they're like, I didn't realize that I needed to kick the ball so much harder than I was used to kicking it, just something simple like that, it's just, everything just has to be faster and stronger and better,
Totally.
So, yeah.
And then the whole aspect that I think is so important is the mental aspect of like, this is a time job. You're in there like every day of the week. Like you're lucky if you get like and mental health, like you're balanced. You don't. Yeah. That's but yeah, it's definitely a job going in knowing like if you're up for that, like it's definitely a full-time thing.
Yeah. So talk about like dealing with disappointment. Not everybody comes in, and people who come to school to play college, Manhattan, Virginia Tech, they're used to being the best players on their club, and then they come in and they're not anymore. It's just different for the most part. And so talk about helping kids get over the hump there and realize that it is kind of a developmental thing that they have to work on and continue to put in the work, and talk about what you've observed and how you're coaching kids to get through that process.
Yeah, I would say adjustment, and some players can adjust as well. But I think like just coming in your freshman year with an open mind, like I definitely went into like, I look back on my 17-year-old self and I'm like, I knew nothing. And then the world hit me in the face, right? In college, kind of hit me with just life. Like you just experienced so much, you're off on time. So going in, I had the mentality of like, I'm going to start and I'm going to play. And, it worked out for me. Like I started and played of every game up until I got hurt, which was my, and I definitely had that like kind of dog eat dog mentality of like anything my way is like, I'm going to bulldoze over. And also not so healthy, but it's like the life of an athlete that I was at 17 years old and really most of my college career. But sometimes, you go to a college and you either overshoot it or undershoot it. You don't really know what to expect, but you're just like, okay, I walk in and I'm gonna get a chance. And you don't always get the chance that you're hoping for. It's very intense. It's a lot of different moving parts, like a lot of different parts in your life, going for the first time and adjusting to that. And then also on the fields, what might be different than what you're doing. It's a lot more tactical than it is technical. Like it's a lot more tactically based and learning systems, learning how to play with a team and defend them, and do you fit into that role? And so that's where I think it's players have the adjustment like, oh, I don't know how to defend in this system, let's work on this. I don't know my positioning, right? Because you recruit a player based off of purely based off of technical skill, but they in a big game they're not defending and working with the team. So I think that's one of the things that I've noticed, like just on the coaching side. And yeah, I mean, I like to say this, it's like, it's such a, like I just said it before, but it's like, it's such a mental battle, like the entire, but then going into your, where you get to develop a little bit more, but in the thick of like the 3 months of like, then it's like a mental battle of ups and downs. And maybe and as a freshman play, but you don't play all your freshman year because there's 2 starters that have been playing there for 2 years or 3 years in position. You're just like, okay, what do I do now? How do I overcome this? And I think, through sports and, you just like learn so much about yourself, but can I get through that? Can I overcome that? It's something that you only know how to do when you face it. But I like to tell people to have learn like a growth mindset in those settings. Like I need to continue to just keep learning, like controlling what I can in my circumstance. And when I get to prove it to my coaches, prove it to myself that I've been doing the work. And, a little bit of patience times for girls that step in and don't play. Like we had a girl on our final team, one of my good friends on the team, that stepped in at right back and was like one of the best right backs I've ever seen. and she didn't play for 3 years before that, but she stepped in the 4th season and was ready to go and like absolutely killed it. So, you know, it's sometimes a bit of patience and understanding and awareness and, you know, just being a good team player, going in with that mindset of like, I have to just think team first, you know. I care about my development, obviously, but like team first.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even if you're the last person on the bench, you still have a role to play, right? I mean, it's something that you got to love your teammates and support them and be ready.
Yeah.
Like you said, so, you know, even if you're going in at the, you know, the 88th minute, you still have to go in with the right mindset. So, yeah, it's a good point. So, what were some of the highlights out of your college career? You went to the Final Four. You just said, right?
Yeah. So that was my 5th year. Like a highlight for me. Highlight in that like our team got there, and you know it was like I look at it as like it took years to build to get to that point, right? Like just the culture of our team and the buy-in from everybody. But I actually wasn't. I never stepped foot on the field that year, except to take a penalty kick. But I never even got to take the penalty kick. But my coach put me on the field to take a penalty kick. But I wasn't cleared to play because I was out for concussion, and they never cleared to play. Yeah, so I was a player coach from the bench. So like this long, like I played 3 years. At my 4th game, I got the concussion, and then I tried to come back and play a 5th year, and that was the year that we went to the Final Four. But I was never able to step on the field. Like I was never clear for play again.
So talk about the difficulty of that. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, it like changed my life. It was like in a way that like soccer was my everything. I thought it was going to be everything, and like I thought I was going to play, you know, like for the rest of my life. Like I just thought I was going to play until like I was ready to retire. But injuries are just a part of the game, and like it's so hard to be prepared for it. But like I think and I talk to a lot of players about this, but when it's done, like it's going to end at some point, and when it's done, it's just like there's really not many resources there to help you move on. You just kind of are expected to move on, but it's like the only thing you knew your whole life. So there's definitely an adjustment period of like, okay, what do I do myself now? And like, who am I? You know, the identity crisis of like, who am I without a ball at my feet? Like, what am I? You know, what's next for me if this isn't it? So I went through that, and then I was going through emotional stuff and mental stuff at the time too. The concussion was literally like, you know, like chemical shit. And that was really hard, and trying to heal from that, and like was definitely going through periods of depression because like they were telling me to stay in a dark room, and I was like, I want to move my body, you know, like so there was a lot going on. But I mean, I like if I look back, I was able to make the best of my situation and like be a player sideline coach. Like all my teammates came to me, you know, when they came on the bench, like, what do you see? It's such a different perspective from the outside than it is on the inside when you're moving like 100 miles an hour and you don't even know what's times. But then from the outside, it's so point out like the attacking mid, like that there's a hole there, like find your feet and like, you know, let's expose them in these spaces and they're in the formation. So this is what's on, like, and it was kind of what rolled me into coaching, right? Like it's a natural progression for me, but I took a few years off after all of it because I just like needed some space from soccer. But yeah, it was definitely like a low point, and I best with what I could at the time. It was really hard to handle. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but like,
I mean, maybe not hours, but you know, go more into it, like your experience, and because there's going to be, you know, kids out there, boys and girls, men and women that are going to go through exactly what you did, and you know, it's not an easy thing to navigate, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. Well, like specifics. I mean, what do you want to know?
Well, I mean, I don't know, what were kind of the lessons from it, and you know, what obviously, you know, you had. We've talked before on this podcast about like identity foreclosure and how it's like what you said, like your identity was being a soccer player instead of being Kelly, you know, and what everything else that made up kept being you. And like when you lose that, what you think is your identity, how hard that is. And then, you know, what kind of drove you to a low point, and, you know, how did you get yourself out of it? I'm sure it would have been different if you had been younger. Like if you had been a freshman when that happened, who knows how you would have gotten through it. So, you know, just kind of talk through like all the things, you know, the things that you can remember, and you know, how you got through it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what resources you use to get through it too, you know?
Yeah. It's like, that was probably, I was just at the lowest point in my career, in my life. Like, I was just like, I don't know where to turn. And I think as athletes, like I talk to a lot of people about this too, you're just like, it really forced me to like, just like open up and be like vulnerable and like talk about a lot of stuff. Like trauma started coming out from the initial hit, like other trauma started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this identity crisis mixed with like a, you know, trauma thing. And like why are my emotions all out of whack? Like why are these things up that like are from my past, you know? And that was really hard to talk to psychologists, but I think there's so much. I'm very interested in the psychological like aspect of like trauma kind of getting in the way, causing symptoms that might overlap with like concussion symptoms. So there were times, and there are still like times in my life where I'm like, is this concussion related? Is this headache coming from like, am I hurt, or am I just really stressed and I'm getting a headache out of stress? I still don't really know all the pieces aren't there, honestly.
Really?
No, I just that like I know it's a mix of trauma and concussions that I can't play because of the post-trauma or whatever. Like the stress just causes the headaches, and they're just like unbearable, and make me really fatigued. And I still don't know if it's like a combination of the two. But I was able, like, I didn't go yet, but I was able to play professionally after my college career. That was like 3.5 years after this. But just to continue talking about the time when I got the concussion, I think there's a lot to be said about like, just like offloading like my like the mental stuff as athletes, as females. Like I think just like trying to hide things, like you just like feel like you have to zone up, like I can get everything, like I'm mad, I need to like mask this pain, like this pain can't, nobody can know about it. And that's why I got injured in the first place. Like that's why I got the concussions, because I was just like heading the ball, like I would get hit in the head or fall and hit my head, or like head somebody else's head. And I was like the number one, like I was that summer league, I played defensive mid, and I was heading the ball like at least like 5 times a game off of punts, and it was just like it. And I was like, okay, but like I was getting injured and I wasn't saying anything about it. And that happened. They're like subconcussive blows to the head. Like they define subconcussive blows. It wasn't like one impact where I got in a bad car accident, forgot some like stuff. You know, it was like a memory thing. Yeah. It was like this build up and like this.
Like a football player, honestly. Yeah.
Exactly. I wasn't, and like wasn't properly adjusted. So, you know, that was a huge part of it. And I do think that like talking to a therapist, talking to a psychologist at the time really helped me just get my back to normal. I was trying to like figure out, I was on like Adderall at the time, like the medication I was taking in school. I had to come off of that completely, just to get back like and normalcy. Yeah, I felt like from the concussions, I got like very like hypervigilant. Like I was like very anxiety induced, so it made me like feel these like anxiety feelings I never felt before. So I was connecting that to the concussions as well.
Right.
Okay, now I don't know what to do. So yeah, the therapist helped me, and that was like the thing, to seek help on things that I didn't want to talk about, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm normal. This is not good. And like I finally spoke the words out loud, and just getting them out and talking to somebody like really helped me realize like, okay, I'm normal. Like this is okay. People go through it.
Yeah.
I think the thing of like not feeling alone in it, like you think you're the only one out there. Trust me, and I tell my girls this all the time. Like I've probably been through it. If I have, somebody's been. No, you're not weird, or like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. What was I going to ask you? We've talked about this again, like on the podcast before, but I'll say it as many times as I possibly can. Like vulnerability is not being weak, right? I mean, it's important for kids to hear. Like, I mean, you said it yourself. Like you've gone through what they are trying to go through, right? As an athlete, and the sooner you're vulnerable, the better teammate you're going to be, and the better athlete you're going to be. I mean, it seems to be anyway, and I think you would probably agree with that. So yeah,
that's like I think that is like the biggest thing to take away from that is like vulnerability is strength, and like it's so much easier to go back than it is to say something. So you just do the thing and you go back on instead of doing the hard thing and speaking up.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it makes you a leader, and it makes you, yeah. So another thing that you mentioned was, as a female, you felt a lot of pressure, and, I'm not a female. So whenever I have a female guest on, I encourage you to talk about, the experience of being, a successful athlete as a female, and, what that experience is like, and so that other kids can hear, what that experience is, and, the challenges that you face, and, whatever you want to delve into there to address that.
Yeah. And I think like, I was thinking about this today. It's like successful female. Like I remember Abby Wambach got up on stage with Kobe Bryant, and was it I think it was another football player for the ESPYs awards. I don't remember who the other male was, but it could have been Tom Brady. But she's like, okay. Oh, no, it was Kobe Bryant. Sorry, I just forget who it was. But they were all retired, right? And she was like, okay, I'm on stage and I'm retiring, but I have to go get a job after this. Like, compared to like these men up there standing up there that like, they're set for their life.
Yeah.
And, you work your entire, putting the same amount of work in, sometimes more work, right? And it's like, you have to fight like a battle that's been, like if we're starting here, they're starting here, right? And we're working from like a lower level. So it's, it's just that type of thing where I've worked life for this, and you wish you got more in return. And like all the and everything, I would never regret it. I would never regret my entire career. I think, like looking back, it's just, I can't imagine anything else. Right? Soccer was I was going to play until I couldn't. And it's come to a good place with women's soccer right now. Like the time to invest, like it's absolutely growing around the world. Obviously, with the World Cup, like people can see that. But at the time that I was playing, there were definitely things that were challenges. Even when I got to the professional level, I was like, okay, this doesn't feel like professional soccer. Like this isn't what I thought it would be. As enjoyable as like the team culture at Virginia Tech. When I went overseas to Sweden, it was a little bit more of the feeling of a men's team. I played for in the Damelsvenskan, and it was, a high level. Like it was like Sweden. But in terms of like resources that we had, there wasn't like a psychologist or a nutritionist, or we didn't get, food or fed, before games, something like that. Sometimes snacks were in the locker, but yeah, I mean, I was saying to a professional environment staff, I think now would speak in a different way about where the NWSL is headed, and what teams overseas are like able to offer them. I have friends over in England playing that are like that have cars, and big incentives to come over, to play for teams over in the FA.
Right. Yeah. I mean, those are big time.
Yeah, it's definitely in a spot than it was when it was 2018 when I retired.
So do you feel like like the English clubs, those are the ones that stick out to me because, I follow the Premier League, obviously. So there's like, they're very visible to me. Do you feel like the clubs are like completely invested in that and that they're doing a good job, or do you feel like there's still a long way to go? And then talk about your experience in the NWSL too.
Yeah. I think there's always going to be, a long way to go, especially with the teams that aren't like funded by like, so over in England, like the FA League, like there's a men's Premier League team and then the women's. It's a really cool system and very well that way. Able to, afford players like Sam Kerr, like Leah Galton, and, time players that are like doing good things for them. But it's definitely improving in America. I would say like the NWSL is on the rise. I know like talks of another competing professional league over in the US. I don't know when that's going to come about. Hopefully one day they and it becomes that thing. But like right now, I do think there's an investment and people are invested in sports. I think it's time to get invested and people are realizing the numbers, like it's all showing, pointing in the direction like, okay, buy a women's soccer team, you're gonna get money if you buy where it's never been like that in the past. So yeah, I mean you put it on, people will watch it. Like women's sports, everyone they won't deny that. But I don't know what took so long.
Right.
I think it's like the fight, they had to hear it and now they're doing something about it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Obviously, that was like teams like Spain, what they're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, and like this kind of era that's leading the national team right now with like Pino leaving, Julie Ertz, like those women who fought so hard for the position that now, like need to be recognized for creating a difference in the game. And, I think they are, but it's incredible. Like I was just crying the other day watching her farewell game. I was like, oh my gosh, this era, like so much for women's soccer.
Yeah. For so long. Yeah.
For so long. Yeah. And to have to fight, I mean, must have tired her out so much. We don't necessarily see everything going on behind the scenes, but like, I know like her and Kristen Press and there's other people to obviously like, credit to, but like a lot of them just working so hard behind the scenes to make it happen. Meanwhile, going on and playing in games, like when all that noise was happening, it's like that's so hard to focus, and they were able to win a World Cup during that. So just incredible.
For sure. So talk about your experience as a pro and, how much different it was and so compare and contrast also. Well, just answer that question, then I don't need to ask a second question yet.
Okay. So I actually got onto Sky Blue. Like I was given a contract through an open tryout. So it was like 120 girls for tryout, and then they cut that in half to 6 players the next day to try it, like preseason. And then in preseason, I made it. Erin Diamond made it, and Daniel Schulman made it. And then, those were the 3 of us. Yeah, I mean, the level.
3 out of 120.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like look back, it was super competitive to get there, but it was mostly. I mean, once I got there, then it was like, okay, the job's not done. Now you have to like compete with these players in preseason, and see where you fit in. And yeah, I played really well. Like the first half of preseason, I was just psyched to be there. Really well, and then I mean, just to look at the level of play, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like everybody's so good here. Like it was like a team, like such good players. Like I said this the other day, margin is small. Like, you could be so good, but the player next to you is just that much better. So the way I explain the pros is like you have to have something, and like whether it's your speed, like whether you win every ball in the air, your height, or whether you are like have a knack for scoring goals, or you're just like a super solid defender. Like you have to have something that sets you apart. And I think it's a good message too for, kids that are looking to get recruited. Do something that sets you apart. Like, I was very communicative when I was in my like at tournaments. I knew coaches. Well, I was at the time, but I knew coaches were there. I was like, I'm going to be loud, and I'm going to everybody's going to know that I want the ball because just be very, very, very loud and very demanding, right? No, shows that I want the ball at my feet and that I'm a midfielder that is competent. So I think that definitely was something that I remembered from those days of the recruiting process, and have just kind of applied that in tryouts too with Sky Blue. That's how I was. Always showing up early, to warm up. And I took it very seriously. I took it as this is my job. I'm a professional, and that's how I kind of grew up playing. I always knew that that's how I wanted to be and carry myself, and it grew into the pros. And I would say that my fitness was something that set me apart, but there wasn't other than that. I was very technical player and have good vision and can see, have a eye as a midfielder as a 10 through, but wasn't able to separate myself out enough. I wouldn't say my professional career was I did give it all I had, because I started kind of getting headaches again, wondering, what my future was going to look like. And I ended up playing 2 years in the NWSL, and then 1 year over in with Hammarby. And then just having kind of questioning thoughts, is this right? Should I be this? My head's hurting again. And I was I'm just going to hang it up. So, I felt like my career world wasn't like the career I had in college. It was kind of okay, I did a great job in preseason. I made it. And then it was kind of a slow decline, which, I look back on and I'm okay, maybe that's all I needed to know that I could do it. And now there's something different and better for me out there.
Yeah.
Felt like.
Yeah. Talk about the difference, when you were a freshman at Tech and adapting there, and then when you were a rookie with Sky Blue, what was the transition period like, and which one was more difficult? Which was the steeper learning curve?
But I would say I was more ready, prepared for college, because I was 100% ready to go for it and play my game and prove myself. Whereas for me, I think that I was up for the challenge in the beginning, and then was slowly starting to realize through my career that this wasn't it anymore. So I didn't have the heart in it anymore as much as I used to. I was questioning and wondering about hey. And so there were kind of things in there that were throwing me off course. Whereas when it was tunnel vision when I went to college.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess you probably, through the injury, you may have learned that there was kind of more to life than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was life changing. Right. It was just okay, you got to stay healthy. Your health is the most more important than anything in your life is your health. So that's compromised because of this. And I never thought that way, but I think that really made me grow up kind of and see it this is life or death. This is something to mess around with. This is your brain. You don't get it.
Yeah, very true. You mentioned your dad early on. What was he saying through all this?
Through all my whole career, or
well, just dealing with your injury, and what was your family like? Come on, Kelly, or were they? I'm sure they were supportive, but
yeah, they were supportive. They I feel at times didn't know how to help me, but just them being there, and being family. By default, it's I know I have my people, so I'm very to have that, and they support me in everything. But yeah, I definitely, it was definitely hard for that. It saw me I don't know. Never really talked about seeing me lose myself. mental way. They never really talk about that, and I don't think they think that. Maybe they do. I don't know. But like, but they were just sad for me because they were like, oh my gosh, we know, like, I would say one of the things that sets me apart from players, like my passion for the game, and they knew like how passionate I was and how much I wanted it, and they just saw it like me losing it in front of my eyes, and they were like, we don't want to push her because this is her brain, you know.
Right.
But I know she's gonna like do everything she can to come back and like might risk her health here, so like let's support her, but also like, you know, like take it seriously and you know, be there for her in that way. So yeah, my dad was really supportive through the whole thing. Like, I think I cried to him every day my senior year, and he just phone, and you know, I think about it now and I'm like, the man had a life at work and he still made time for me.
Right.
Like, God, parents are the best. Like, you know, you don't see it that way at the time, but they like their world, like siblings and I are their world, so they would do anything. I'm very lucky to have.
It's a weird feeling when you have kids and they're going through a hard time. You feel it yourself, you know. Right. So I can relate to what he was probably feeling at that point. So so talk about some other things, you know, in your bio, it talks about going to some women's national team camps, and then you did some like charitable outreach kind of stuff too. So maybe touch on a couple, you know, those things as well.
Yeah,
and you know what they did for you as a life experience, you know.
Yeah, really touch on the women's national team. I went to 2 under-20 camps and then 2 under-23 camps. So the 23s was kind of that interim under 23. Yeah, it's that interim. They like don't really know where to go. You're like not under 20 and you're not full team, but you're like still a system, still thinking about. Let's see her like in, you know, a different environment. So they're all high level. And like I said before, there's something that like, you know, everybody has that's going. So it was a very good experience for me. Like the under 20 camp was like before one of the under World Cups, and I didn't make the team, but I like Crystal Dunn, Sydney LaRue. Who else is there? I think that's the list of like bigger names. Other ones there at the time. You know, you just play with so many players that were so good that you're like, I'm like, you just think that everyone when you're young to make the national team because you're like, that player is so good, that player is good. And you go to U20, you know, Christine saying the names that made it, but Amber Brooks was there. Amber's actually a good friend of mine, but yeah, I mean, she's been in and out of camp. She's a well-known name, and like she NWSL. But yeah, I mean, it was a cutthroat environment. Like it was like, you know, you don't know who's like your friend really. So like you get kicked out of camp, like if you're gonna get on the team. So it's just like we're kind of waiting every day for like that list, like players that team, and an environment that I liked and tried to make the most of, but also was like, I don't know about this, you know. I definitely was like full life. I was like national team. But getting to that point and like being there with everybody, I think like just the first few camps, like if you're in the system, like then you get you get more comfortable and you find a place there. But I definitely like understand why people don't love going to the camps. They're competing in the tournament, completely different. Everybody's, you know, on the same team, fighting for something, like fighting for, you know, the gold medal. But in the camps, you're fighting for next to you, and they're good, you know. So it's a very like high intensity and environment. One of them, they were in California, like 29 Palms, like in the desert, really out there, in the middle of nowhere, like Olympic training center.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then under 23 camps, a little bit less pressure, but still, I'm just like grateful to like when I look back, I had those opportunities to play with like such great players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what did you notice about like the players that you mentioned, kind of the household names? You know, what was their, you know, the differentiating work ethic, and what did you notice about them that, you know, might have been different than kind of the crowd, so to speak?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because when you're playing with like all the best players, like something about those players stick out. So I mean, Sam Mewis, it's like one of her steps, like two of mine, right? She's like a tall 10 that like there's not many that can carry the ball at pace like her and like just have this poise and like comfortability on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she's just like so spot on, and she's got a great shot. Like she's just like the kind of well-rounded midfielder that you want on. And like she can do all those things like faster than everybody at her height. You're just like, I don't know how, you know, like, and I'm never gonna try to be that. But you admire it, and you're like, but she's also like such, and you're like, I don't know. She just doesn't like seem as nervous at the. She's been to them, but she definitely had Christy pushing her whole life, which is really cool to see them play together. Christy and she went to Boston College the same year as me when I went to Virginia Tech, so I always played. You know, she's similar to Sam, but she's got a nasty left foot. Like, please, don't give her space to ball. Like a rocket. The same kind of poise ball. The lefty like harder to reach.
Right.
And then Crystal, I actually competed in college too. Like kind of like their player that played and everywhere. And she was like, but also like forward and outside. And one game, we actually ended up with like my favorite game in my life because I scored the only goal. And it was just like we beat UNC, and it was just at home. But like that was the only good thing I did that game was score because I had to man mark Crystal Dunn for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And I remember literally winning the ball off her once, but I couldn't keep up with her. Like I slid like did a slide tackle in the corner, and they had a corner, but I was like, okay, like that was the only good thing.
Right.
And yeah, I mean you like her speed just sets her apart, but she's also just so athletic. Like things she does is just like, yeah. I mean, you're playing with all these incredible players, and then they're just like a level above. Like, okay, you know, if they don't get injured, if everything out, like they're the type of players that you
right.
Cindy LaRue. Yeah, I mean, just her speed and athleticism.
Yeah.
Is world class. Class talent.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that probably like those experiences make you obviously a good coach. However, I would also think that like you're a good identifier of talent. Like obviously it's not even talent. Like the things that make up a player that you don't necessarily see, like the intangible attributes type stuff. Like you can probably identify that pretty well, I would expect.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like from when I was very young, I had, you know, coach that just kind of like I was very lucky to fall in love with the game and also like learn from good coaches just game and how to play. And so I always watched soccer growing up. Like I don't know if a lot of young girls did watch Premier League games, but I loved watching it. And I would watch my player, like watch my position, watch the 10. And I watching players in the 10 role or in the midfield and how they play the ball, and I tried to replicate that, just be like I was an engine, I was fit, like, just ball and move the ball out of space, like create kind of like philosophy of the game, and like my love the game, like just being able to move the ball out of space and work off of each other, and like it's not always just one thing and just playing your position as like, as told to do, but just creating things off of what you see in the game. You can see that on the field when you're watching players. Like, what decisions are people making? Are they seeing space? Are they moving into or out of space, like at the right time, timing things, and like, are they finding, the ball behind, like, pulling a player out of position to do that. So like easy for me to spot players that understand in that way. Harder to bring players up at this level that the game in that way, because they're coming from a different, and that's a bit of the challenge in college too. Everyone's coming from different backgrounds, who taught in different ways.
Right. Yeah, and you don't have any time with them, basically. Like,
right.
Especially a freshman coming in, they're expected to help you win games within like 2 to 3 weeks at the most.
Exactly.
So you're just getting started at Manhattan College, right?
Yes, this is my
second year. So what's that been like, and how's the team responded to you, and you come in with all these experiences and that sort of thing, and but just talk about your experience there and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think I think that every women's soccer team should have a female on staff, whether it's the head or the assistant. I think it just helps the head coach understand, where the players are coming from, and I think it helps the girl kind of like feel comfortable, right, in an unspoken way. It's like, okay, female's around, she's gonna have our back, kind of thing. Like, she understands us. There's things that, like I said before, like, you're a man, you're not a woman. So, and I'm not a man, so I wouldn't, I would always want a male. If I was coaching a men's team, I'd always want a male perspective.
Right.
So I think it just adds that kind of value to the whole picture. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like emotional and mental things that go into the women's game, especially like emotional things that go into the women's game. I think just the presence of a female, I think that does a lot. But just being able to kind of talk to me about things I might not want to bring up to Brendan, the head coach, just a good balance. It's definitely a good balance, and Brendan and I get along really well. So we have a good balance there, and we're doing good this season. I'm not going to speak on our season. I don't like to jinx anything. The girls are great. I mean, they're awesome people. They're great. We're really coming together this year. They're really receptive to feedback, and they just want to learn and grow. And I think there's always something to learn. I think I would say like the hard thing that you don't know when you're that age, like there's like your picture, you don't know life, right? Like, and you only know like your where you were raised, and then college is like still this small kind of world, and then after that you're out in the world on your own. It's a huge world out there, and like everybody's going to go in different places, and just like everybody places. So it's how do you do the best job as a coach of bringing everybody together and getting on the same page?
I had she's a former coach. She works for the NCAA now, and she played goalie at Iowa. Had her on the podcast, and she's like, I think it was her. I hope it was her, because I don't want to like quote the wrong person, but it was basically like women have the same reactions to things, same emotions around things as guys. It's just they exhibit it differently. So it's like, just let them, emote, I guess, for lack of a better word. But, so I have a daughter who's 24, and I just want to apologize for, not letting her just do her thing, and understanding that, she just was handling things differently than a guy would. So
totally.
It's important. And that speaks to your point. Like, it's important to have someone who just understands. So a balance of.
I think definitely like the psychological side of it is important to know. Like, as a coach, I'm very interested in it. And there's some players that need it a little bit more, but like the praise, that you give players, like there's definitely, it's good to balance that out among the coaching staff too. Cause like sometimes I have to be a harsh person, right? Like come in a little bit harder on the girls, and Brendan can offer his perspective that's, maybe not as harsh, or the other way around. So
Right.
I think just being able to like balance each other out is really important. And just knowing that, like, there's big, I think, like, we like, and we want to just know that we're right. We want to get things right. Like, if we do something that's, maybe wrong, like if it comes across like in a way that like, we did, like, if it comes across in a harsh way, then we think we're bad at soccer, and then like our confidence gets super, super down. So yeah, I mean, that is like, just mentally being able to build it up yourself and being resilient.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to definitely be that like kind of dialogue, I think, between maybe you and or a player and a coach, and that understanding and trust there. Sorry if it's coming across in a harsh tone. That's how it's coming across. But I'm doing this because I believe in you, and I can help. And I think this is what we need to work on. Right. That's very important, as opposed to feeling like you're getting.
Right. Well, and you've probably, taken the time to build trust, and you can't have those conversations and have them taken the wrong way if you haven't built trust with the other person. So.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. And that goes back to the vulnerability thing. So.
Right. Yeah. Yep. It's hard to like do that. Like I remember how like hard-headed I was, and like I was like I do yoga with the girls sometimes, and I'm like, I wonder what they think about this, because it's good for stretching, right? And like it's good for mindfulness, and we do before we play, and I'm like, believe in it, like they're gonna need it at some point, right? And like after this, what are they walk away with? And it's all the tools that life. So, and I think visualization is one of those things that like really helped me in my game. Like going into I would use it before going to fields. And so we just for 5 minutes to like do some breathing exercises and like sit there and like imagine ourselves on the field, like smelling the grass and getting into like zone before actually going out. Usually you don't have that to do that. Like, and maybe you're of you and like you're like freaking out and you gosh, I'm starting and I don't feel comfortable. But like once you get into that meditation, like even for 5 minutes, time to breathe and be with yourself. It's like, okay, like remember my game I've ever played. Okay, I can do this. I'm a good soccer player. Like that little reminder of like, know what you're doing out there. Like is important.
Yeah. So I was wrong. It just popped into my head that the person who said that was a women's lacrosse coach at Christopher Newport. And she actually, so to tack on to what you're talking about, she uses a journal, like a sports oriented journal that their team journals in before matches, games, I guess, in the bus. And like it helps create that positive imagery that you're talking about, and kind of build yourself up and that sort of thing. I thought that was really interesting that they journal before they actually compete, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, like quiet time before.
Yep.
So it's so important, and I think it brings that in a way too. Going out on the got this, and like people might be nervous, but that's okay. Like that's good nerves get us ready.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I thought that it's really cool. Like, I mean, I'm a good bit older, but like we never would have thought it. We just listened to loud music and that's how we got pumped up for a game. But it's way more effective and intentional to do those mindfulness type things to get yourself ready. So
totally.
Yeah, I would have been a pro if I had that stuff. No, I'm kidding. Not even close. So, but anyway, Kelly, I really appreciate it. This has been fun, and I hope that we can, reconnect again and maybe get you on with another player, coach or two. I think that'd be fun too. You guys could play off each other. So, but I really appreciate it. Let me hit stop.